Hello! Have you ever found yourself with a really big sketchbook and absolutely no idea what to draw and paint in it? Well, I sure have. And I know I can't be the only one, so I've come up with 5 ideas ranging from super easy to a bit more complicated. Hopefully there's something here for everyone, no matter your skill level. Let's get into it! I don't really have specific titles, but for my first idea I had this blank page next to these really bright cats, and I decided I was going to do something really easy. I've wet the background, and now I'm dropping in all sorts of colours from my large watercolour paint palette here. These are Holbein paints. Any watercolours will do, and any colour combination that appeals to you at the time. I was looking at the pinks and blues because I had a unicorn in my mind. But I'm not actually going to draw a unicorn, you'll see what happens with that. I just wanted the unicorn colours, so I've gone yellows, pinks, blues, greens, sort of pastel shades, although I did end up picking a few brighter ones as well, and I'm just building up the colours. I'm not really thinking about this, I'm just chucking them on and letting them mix together as they want to. Trying to keep colours that are compatible together, so the pink and the blue will make a purple, and then the yellow and green will just make a slightly yellower green, things like that. I went around the edges with the pink just to make kind of a loose border. So I guess my first idea is throw paint on a page, keep it abstract, it doesn't have to be anything. The idea is to just put colour down and get the creative ideas flowing. And before I started this, I was really tired and grumpy. I was just not in the mood to actually think of a picture. So this was a good way to cheer myself up just by adding bright colours. That always does it, even if I don't actually make a particular picture or anything. I left it to dry, and now I have a really cool background, which I could leave for later, or I could do something with now, and I had an idea for this already. Remember that unicorn? Well, in another journal that I have, it's kind of my everyday one where I just stick random stuff in. I'd got this sticker from a company called Cyber Unicorns, and I'd cut it up and stuck it in here, but I was thinking it was a bit busy. Now this is a vinyl sticker, so it's actually peeling off that layer of wrapping paper that I'd put in there from a gift that I'd sent to my mum. And I decided this was going to get moved into my sketchbook here, and I'm just going to sit it right in the center of this page. You really could not get any easier than this. So my first idea is basically paint a random abstract background and then stick stickers on if you want to, like I've done here. If painting is too hard, just put the stickers in, and I often include them in my sketchbooks. I ended up including Cyber Unicorns as well, and now I have a lovely colourful page spread. On to idea number 2, and this also is related to sticking things in a book. I've had these beautiful arty Stamperia papers for ages. I just can't bring myself to cut them up and use them. They are the perfect size for this sketchbook. And I have 2 really ugly pages here that I've been wanting to cover up for a while. This lovely paper is going to be perfect for this. I had a rogue brush there. This idea really relates to covering up the pages that you don't like in your sketchbook, either because you've made a mess of it, or you've just got swatchy bits like that, or the ink's leaked through from the other side. All I'm doing here is using a bit of double-sided sellotape. You could use glue, anything really, to stick it down, and I'm just going to put the paper directly over the top of my mess here. That is alcohol ink that's leaked through from my cover page, and it's been bothering me for quite a long time. In fact, every time I open this book and see this page spread, I've just hated it. But look at that, it's a perfect cover-up, and I've even got a little bit of border there. I have a second Stamperia pad about the world of books. These are scrapbooking and papercraft kind of papers. Now, I know not everyone's going to have this, but if you're anything like me, you do tend to hoard pretty papers and things like that, even if it's like tissue paper or napkins. Anything you have could stick in here. You could cut things up and collage them, cut pictures out of magazines, use stickers. There's a wealth of ideas here. Use whatever you have. You don't have to go out and buy something for this. I particularly love these 2 pictures, and I decided to finish off the borders with some paint markers. I'm using gold for the left-hand side and silver for the right-hand side because I thought that would go nicely with the blue of the sky. And I'm just colouring around those edges to hide any of the ink that's showing through, or any of my swatches or picture that I hadn't covered up because it's too close to the border. And this is just going to finish off the entire thing. Plus I'm using paint pens, so this totally counts as doing art in my sketchbook. But you really can put anything into a sketchbook. It doesn't have to be just drawing, especially on those days where you just don't feel like doing any art, but you also kind of want to do something creative. And I often find that I get inspired by the pictures from the magazines or papers that I'm using here. Another idea is if you've been somewhere and you've gotten a brochure and you want to keep some of it but maybe not the entire brochure, you could cut out some of the pictures and stick them into your book, or maybe draw something related to that event. So it's more of an art journal page, things that have happened in real life, and you want to have a souvenir of it in your book. Here's this page spread. I'm so happy with this now. Every time I open the book, it makes me smile. Going from my front cover page here and then flipping over to these beautiful pictures rather than those ugly swatchy pages, and then this shiny one. How can I not be happy with that? Now for idea number 3, and I'd left this one blank because I'd actually smudged some oil pastel on it and it wasn't really usable with watercolours or anything, but that's when the idea struck me. A more complex version of the first 2 ideas. I had seen this magazine at my local news agency and I impulse bought it for that butterfly stamp, and because I like stamps and stencils and paper crafting, it's got a really nice stencil in the set as well. And I'd also found this bee stamp a while ago. I haven't had a chance to use it, so I thought I could today. I really wanted to use this stencil too, it's a lovely one. So idea number 3 is use stamps and stencils in your sketchbook. They're pictures that are already made, you don't have to draw them, but it's still a fun and creative way to fill a page, choosing which stamps to use and the kind of design you might like to have. I knew I had to use that big butterfly stamp. I also had to flip through the magazine to get a few ideas, and they have some projects which can be made with the stamps and stencils provided. Of course, this idea only works if you actually have stamps and stencils, so if you don't, you can just move on from this one. I'm not advocating going out and buying all of these things because that is quite a money pit, but this little brush here is something I did have in my stash and I haven't used it yet, so I figured this would be a perfect opportunity. So aside from buying this magazine with these stencils, I had everything else already in my studio, and I just went through and pulled out a couple of these little acrylic blocks which you put the silicone stamps on so you can stamp it. I have some black archival ink that's waterproof in a couple of different size stamp pads, and some non-waterproof stamp pads as well in different colours. It's a good chance to use some of my stash. So let's see what I can make out of this lot. Now, I had no real plans for this page spread other than I really wanted to use the stencils and the stamps. This blending brush was fantastic, and I think you can use this with pan pastels and all sorts of other art supplies, so it doesn't have to be stamp ink like this. I reckon watercolours would probably work too if you just add a small amount at a time, and I just kept moving the stencil around because it obviously wasn't large enough to fit the whole page, so I just took snippets from it and blended in different stamp colours to kind of make a bit of a gradient. I took some of the ink off my brushes so it's kind of ghosting here, and then I'm using this huge butterfly stamp which I tried to cover as much as possible in ink, but I still made a bit of a mess there. I can never stamp them properly. The one on the left is called a ghost print, where you just stamp whatever remaining ink is on the stamp onto the page, and so you do get quite an interesting effect there where not all of the stamp is going to show. I used another part of the stencil with the brush, and then I finally got to use my bee stamp as well, and I'm just ghost printing a little bit on the left hand side. This page spread ended up being such a chaotic mess because I did have a few stamping malfunctions here, and I was just colouring some of that stamping around the border using this blending brush. I think I might have to get a set of these. I know they do come in sets off Amazon, somewhere like that, so I might buy some and see what they're like, but they're really useful. You can get a subtle amount of colour and use it as a background, or even as a border. It's like dry brushing really. And then I just grabbed that stamp again because I wasn't quite finished with it. I was obsessed with that little butterfly one and I ended up with heaps of them. The magenta ink was the best stamp pad that I have, I think. The other ones weren't working as well. But I don't mind that kind of patchy style stamp where not everything is perfectly lined in ink. It gives it a more interesting effect. And another forgotten supply that I have in my studio are these marabou crayons, which are water soluble, and I coloured some of that onto the stencil. Because it's really soft and waxy, it was blending out perfectly with the brush, and I got some really cool effects. And they were unexpected too. I really only thought of the marabou crayons halfway through this particular page spread. I was just looking around for something else to add and saw these and went, oh, these would be quite nice. So what I really love about a stamping page like this is that it usually inspires a whole load of other ideas that I hadn't previously thought of. Because you haven't got that extra stress of having to come up with your own drawing or painting, the picture's already there. It then allows your mind to kind of go off on other tangents and think of ideas that maybe you were struggling with to begin with. You know, if you've got that horrible art block where just nothing is coming out, an activity like this will usually break through that eventually. And if nothing else, it generally puts me in a much better mood, and I just really like putting colours out, trying different mediums and experimenting. And this can be done at any level. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. This one turned out totally ridiculous. It's pure chaos, but I actually really like it, and I can always add something to this later on if I decide to, or paint over it. It really doesn't matter. In fact, all that matters is now I have another completed page spread, and it's nice to look at lots of busy things and interesting colours on it. If you have stamps and stencils, give this one a go. It's really fun. Now I've warmed myself up, it's time for yet another page spread, and this time I'm going to actually do some art. I've got a pot of water, a paintbrush, my big paint palette, and let's get painting. This one's the easier of the two ideas that I have coming up. Some optional extras, a black pen and a white pen. I will use those later on. But my main idea here is paint blobs. And that just sounds so silly, but honestly this is so much fun and it looks really fantastic when it's done. This one's suitable for beginners all the way to advanced. I decided to go for a blue and green colour palette for this one. I'm choosing a colour and painting 3 blobs for each colour all over the page. Just kind of randomly placing them, but trying to avoid having the same colour next to each other. And then I'm painting these funny shapes, leaving a little white border between them, so it looks a bit like cobblestones or a mosaic. Squares, triangles, circles even could work for this, but I just like doing misshapen ones because I think they look more interesting and they're so easy to do. Over on the other side, I'm going for a redder palette, although I actually ended up using more of the colour spectrum than I first anticipated, going into purples but also yellows. So you could choose either a minimal colour palette or go for a rainbow style, different shades of grey, just whatever you're feeling like at the time. And I'm pretty much repeating the same idea, 3 blobs with the same colour, leaving a space between each one. Why 3? I don't know, it just felt like a good number for this. This is a really excellent exercise if you're feeling tired or stressed in particular. Painting shapes like this is incredibly relaxing, and it's also just a nice way to add colour without having to worry about difficult things like drawing. And in its simplest form, you could leave it just like this. I think it looks really lovely. But I'm going to push it a little bit further using my white and black pens. And this is where you can start getting detailed. But this is still really easy. All I'm doing is outlining the blobs of the same colour and then drawing a matching pattern in each set of blobs. So for the first ones, I did that spiral shape, and I actually switched to a thicker pen here. I'll go back and go over those lines again because they just weren't standing out enough for my liking. And I'm just drawing different patterns. Some of them are inspired by Zentangle and others I've just made up. But I like that each colour has its own pattern, and it does make it look quite interesting. I mean, you could just use one pattern for every single one, like that large spiral. That's the easiest one to do, and that would look quite effective as well. So this is really just based on your own skill level. Draw something really easy, or make it a little bit harder if you feel like it. You can see I've made those spiral lines thicker, and then I just kept going, adding in more and more patterns. This page spread took me a few hours to do, but it was really relaxing, and this is something that I quite often do in front of the TV when I'm watching something that doesn't require my full attention. I can be drawing and being entertained by the telly at the same time. Because this really doesn't require a lot of concentration, it's more about just getting into a zone, drawing out these patterns, relaxing. Like I said before, it's a really good one to do if you're tired or you just have had a stressful day and you want something to do that's fun but not too difficult and a good way to unwind. And it's kind of indirectly really good drawing practice as well, because it really helps with general muscle memory, drawing lines, creating patterns. This is all part of skill building as well. I think repetitive pattern drawing like this actually has been one of the contributing factors for me improving my own drawing skills, because when I'm doing a lot of this, it makes other kinds of drawing a lot easier. It's just that general familiarity, holding a pen, which then carries over to other styles of drawing, such as when I'm trying to draw something a bit more realistic from a reference photo or something like that. So it's important to not dismiss activities like this. You might think that they're a waste of time, but actually they're not. They're really beneficial for building art skills, as well as helping out with mental health and just having a good time with art and creating something. I mean, I had a blank page spread here before, and I couldn't think of anything until I started painting on some blobs, and now I've almost finished the entire page spread with all of these wonderful colours and patterns, and I think they just look so beautiful. And if you are just starting out with art, I really recommend trying this. It doesn't have to be as detailed as what I've done here, but I know it will turn out beautiful no matter what you do, because it's almost impossible to stuff this one up. And even if you do, you could stick some pretty papers over the top. See, I've got that idea covered too. I strongly discourage ripping out pages if you don't like it, because there's almost always a way you can fix it up, or hide it, or just leave it as it is. So I'm just finishing up with my last pattern here, and now for my absolute favourite part, the drawing of a white pen over the whole lot to add in a striking white pattern over the top of the darker paints and the black pen, or just adding in a few highlights on some of these. I'm using a Uniball Signo broad nib, they're my absolute favourites. The other option is to paint the white on using ink, gouache, or even acrylic paint. Once again, whatever you have. But I'll probably link a few of the supplies I've used in the description below if you want to check those out for yourself. If I had to recommend just one thing, it would be the Uniball Signo white pen. I use these all the time. I love them so much. The white ink is really opaque. And I forgot to do one of my blue patterns there. I didn't even realize this until I was editing the video now. It's still not done in the sketchbook. I'll go back to that at some point. But I'm finishing up this side, and I did get a little more detailed with some of these using the white pen, particularly on this particular design. I think this one turned out really well. And even though this took me quite a long time to do, this is probably my favourite idea of the day. This is one of my go-to ideas when I haven't got any other ones. And I've actually made quite a few of these pattern pages, not just in this book, but on some other paper. I'll show you those in a moment. I'm just finishing up here with these last little patterns, and I am so super thrilled with this page spread. You have to try this one out. It is really fun, and no two pages are ever alike because it depends on the colours you use, the patterns. They're all unique, and they all turn out looking really amazing. I'd love to know in the comments what you think of this idea, or any of the ones that I've talked about today. Would you try doing this? Let me know if you do. And here are some of my previous ones. You'll see there are similar designs, and that's because I was using these for this particular page spread. It was giving me that idea. I've used different colours, different patterns, and different paints, I think. Just whatever I had laying around, but I think they're all really interesting, and I'm building up a collection of them. Now it's time for idea number 5. I would say this one's going to be the most advanced of all of them, but it actually just depends on the pictures you find. This one is find a picture and stick it in your book and then copy it. I found this free magazine in a kitchen shop. A lot of these promotional magazines have really amazing photography in them. I mean, that is such a wonderful picture there. And this is a really great way to find reference photos that are right in front of you, and you don't have to go onto the internet. Sometimes you might not even have an internet connection, so I'm going old school analog here. But I find these sorts of magazines at the supermarket. They usually put out one with lots of beautiful food photography. This one's really nice. And just look around when you go shopping to see if they have any cool little magazines or pamphlets that you can take home and have a flip through. I really love that photo of the kitchen utensils on the left there. That would be a great one to draw. I find that everyday objects often end up as really good subjects for paintings, and I often find magazines like this are really inspirational for composition and colours, basically anything that will spark or prompt an idea to come forth. I have a collection of magazines which I don't necessarily use straight away, but sometimes I like to flip through them and find some inspiration. I'd had this one for a month or two before I ended up using it. Now, I really love that photo of the glasses, and I also like this picture too. I was considering doing them on different pages, but I decided to glue both of these on the same page, and then I'm going to draw on the right hand side. Now, the reason I say this is more complex is because I'm actually going to use these as drawing practice so that I can copy directly from the picture and draw it over again on the right hand side. By gluing the photos in, I'm not only immediately filling a page in my sketchbook, that's a good little hack there, but when I flip back to this, I can see the reference images that I used for my own artworks. Now, the complexity of this really depends on the pictures you're using as your references. You could go for something super easy or a lot more complicated. And then how is it going to be interpreted into the art? Is it going to be a more realistic drawing, which is mostly what I'm going for here? Or is it going to be something a lot more abstract and it's just more of a loose interpretation of the pictures? Because of course, you don't have to draw exactly what you're seeing. It is meant to be art, it doesn't have to be a photograph. But this is also a really great exercise to practice drawing skills. I started out with pencil and then I'm inking over the top with a fine liner. I generally don't go for a super realistic style. Mine is definitely more in the stylized category, so it looks mostly like what it's supposed to, but maybe not as complicated or detailed. I tend to simplify things down a little bit and leave out things that I don't really like if I don't want to have it in my picture. But I did follow these two quite closely for the purposes of this, and I just really like the pictures, so I thought I would see if I could draw them and get something that fairly resembles the photographs. Drawing is a skill that I'm always working on improving. Like any other skill that needs to be mastered, it does take a long time to do, lots of practice, and there's always something that can be improved on. But for drawings like this, I do have to be in the right headspace and in the mood for it. If I'm too tired, I usually can't get this level of precision, in which case that's when I fall back on some of my other ideas that I've shown in this video, because they're a lot easier to do and a lot less stressful. But I was feeling a lot more capable on this day, and I was able to get this entire drawing done within about an hour or so. Not that time really matters, it takes as long as it takes when it comes to something like this. And I felt like I wanted to line everything with the pen rather than leaving it as a pencil drawing, but that's just entirely whatever I felt like at the time. I'm of course going to use watercolour paints on this, so I did use a waterproof ink, just rubbing out my pencil lines and then adding in a few more details here. Those onions I didn't quite trust myself to do with pen, so I used a pencil to begin with, but I think everything else I just drew in with the pen as I was going along. And now I'm starting with the background, and I really wanted to paint in those lovely tiles because I thought that would be quite challenging. I'm using Davies Grey from the Holbein range, and it is such a fabulous colour. It's this greenish grey and it's really useful. I think I managed to get the tiles quite well in that top picture, and then I'm using Davies Grey just to paint the whole background on the glasses one to give it a slightly off-white look rather than having the white paper. And then I just basically went to town painting all of the rest of this. It took me quite a long time to do the painting, probably a few hours, and I think I did this over a couple of days. Because I don't always do artworks in one sitting, I will leave them and then come back to them to see what else needs to be done. And this one was quite detailed because I was following along just looking at the photos on the left hand side and mostly copying it onto my own painting. Some things are a little bit different, but otherwise I think it's pretty close. And I suppose the main message that I wanted to convey from this entire video is that there is creative inspiration all around us. You don't have to spend loads of money on it. You can find things that are free, like this magazine. And my other piece of advice is you do kind of have to go looking for inspiration sometimes. So do actively look around if you're in a shop to see if they have a free magazine that you can take or another interesting pamphlet. Even someone's business card might have a picture on it. There is stuff everywhere that you can find. You can take a photo on your phone of a pretty shop display. If you go somewhere interesting, see if you can find a sticker or a pamphlet you can cut up to stick in your sketchbook. And yeah, just basically build a collection of things which you may not use straight away but will come in handy at some point. Just try not to hoard too much like I do. But from my own personal experience, creative inspiration is something which will occasionally strike me out of the blue, but most of the time I have to be actively searching for it, and that's easier said than done sometimes. There are some days where I just cannot face doing anything creative, and it is also okay to have a break if you're feeling like that. Have a rest for a few days, and usually that will help recharge your batteries. Now I'm just adding in a little bit of coloured pencil over my dried watercolour, just to add in a few highlights and shadows, and make it a little bit more interesting. I've also got my trusty white pen here for a few very bright highlights. But going back to what I was saying, because I make videos every week, I have to come up with ideas all of the time, and that is really, really hard. So it's really important for me to find as many sources of inspiration as possible, things which I will use straight away or store for a rainy day when I'm going through those times of low inspiration. Creativity tends to come in waves for me, so sometimes I'll be super creative and just get so much done, and other times I will have no creative energy whatsoever, in which case I'll either rest or I might give myself a little nudge with something easy, and then that sets off the creative wave once more. I really hope my ideas today have been useful and that it gives you some inspiration to make an art or stick some pretty pictures into your book. And look, I have pretty pictures stuck in, and I've drawn my own things in here. I really love this page spread. This one was so much fun. I learned quite a lot. They're by no means perfect, but it's more about progress than perfection, and doing whatever you can to find that creative flow once more. I'll just flip through all of the pages that I got done in here. It's quite a lot in the end. I really love this, even though they're not my actual artworks. I just love those pictures so much, and I'm glad I didn't cut them up. They just look so nice in my sketchbook, and it makes me feel inspired to draw books and castles and art supplies. This one's the easiest that I did, just a nice unicorn background with a unicorn sticker on the front, and that Cyber Unicorns has buckled a bit, but it is now stuck on there permanently, so there's not anything I can do about that. Never mind, let's flip over to the next page spread, this chaotic one with the stamps and the stencils. I may come back to this and add some more. It feels like it needs something, but I'm not sure what yet. It's perfectly fine as it is though. And then next up, I have the colourful blobs with all of those crazy patterns. This is definitely my favourite tip, and I think you should try this one out for sure. I was looking for the other one because it's in here somewhere. There it is. Cut out free magazine pictures and my own artworks of them. This is a fun one too, and definitely the one that is most skill building of all of the 5 that I showed. And those are all of the ideas that I have for today. I hope there's been something useful in there for you that inspires you to get into your own sketchbook and fill out some pages. I'm slowly getting there with this one. Before I go, I just want to let you know that I have a midweek video coming out this week, which is a paint pen review. So stick around for that one, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. You might also want to subscribe, and I've got some more sketchbook idea videos for you up here. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!